Good afternoon. It is 3:30, and we will go ahead and begin our meeting. Looks to me like just visually that we have a quorum, but Mr. Johnson, will you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilman Helsley. Here. Dr. Lyons. Here. Councilwoman Parker. Former Vice Mayor Saunders. Here. Vice Mayor Smith. Here. Former Vice Mayor Pavlis.
He's unable to attend.
Yes. You have a quorum.
Thank you. What you will see on the agenda next is the minutes of our May 27th meeting, which were distributed. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, they will be approved as presented. Any public comments?
There's no one on the list to speak.
No officers or subcommittees met, so no reports. No special committees, so no reports. No special orders. Unfinished business. Mr. Johnson, will you tell us what you have included under unfinished business?
Yes, thank you. Beginning on page 11 of the packet, these are the amendments that the committee or the task force recommended at its last meeting that this group voted on. There are no changes here. It's just to include under unfinished business and to provide that to the task force going forward. For the next item of business, the memorandum of the task force, again, nothing has changed with this document since previous meetings. That begins on page 20 of the packet. The rules that I am recommending be reorganized, again, nothing is new there. Those are on page 21. Item D, this is something that you postponed at your last meeting. This was a consideration of Public Chapter 411 with respect to legislation that authorizes city councils to meet through electronic means. You considered this at your last meeting, did not take action. So that is before you.
Thank you. And then,
Yes, sorry, that is on page 22 of the packet.
so let's go ahead and take a look at that and see if we can come to any thoughts about that. As I recall, this is the ability for us to allow someone to participate electronically in a city council meeting if they meet the stipulations as required in this, well, I guess in the bill, in the ordinance, which says the municipal legislative body member is dealing with a family or medical emergency that determined by the body. The member has been called into military service. Or C, the legislative body member is unable to attend a meeting due to inclement weather. Then you could participate through video conferencing or other web-based media. As I recall, back several years ago, this was put into place, I believe. Senator Briggs brought it forward when so many people from the National Guard had been called up to active duty, and many members of legislative bodies across the state had members in the Guard, and when they were activated, they could not participate in person, and that could sometimes affect quorum and decision-making. So that was when this originally happened. I believe it expired, and now they brought it back for these reasons. And we have to decide, as I believe, I recall, and Mr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have to decide if we want to add this to our rules. We don't have to do anything, but if we want the ability to do this, we have to add it to the city council rules.
That's correct. It's permissive, so city council is not obligated to adopt rules to allow for this.
Is it a problem?
I don't think so. I think, for me, I think the question, the inclement weather thing is what I think we got hung up on a little in discussion the last time. It wasn't so much, if you're called to military service, I think nobody has a problem with that. I think if you are, if you've got a family member in the hospital, but you can step away because you need to be somewhere out of town with somebody and have a private place to conduct a meeting, I don't think people have a problem with that. It's a little bit of how do you then deal with inclement weather if everybody decides they want to do it electronically, because you can't all decide to do it, correct? I know. So my question is, do you have to adopt all of these, or can you pick and choose and allow for the first two if you have a problem with the third? Ms. McNally, do you have any idea? Not to put you on the spot.
I don't think so. There we go. No, you can't pick and choose. It was legislation passed this past year, and it is very narrow and strict as to how you can participate in by electronic means. Will has the legislation, I'm sure, pulled up. So
it's in
it's
our
not a
packet.
menu of options. It's all or nothing.
As I read the bill, the only discretion given to city council would be determining what is a medical emergency.
I'm going to speak. Nobody else has got their light on, and I kept mine on. My personal opinion is, why would we not allow this? If it becomes a problem, we could always take it away, but I would hate for a member to have a situation where they have to be called out of town for a family medical emergency or something, and we want them to participate, or they need to participate, It's just
I think if I could, I don't think there's much of a problem with multiple people. I mean, it says a maximum of 20%. Well, that's one person, because is all it would allow.
Right.
'Cause,
Right.
2 out of 9 would be over 20%. So I agree. I think allowing this, and then if there's an abuse, I don't know what the abuse would be, except a person never showing up, probably the same person. I don't know that's
That's not
strikes me as a horrible problem, in doing it electronically, but that would be, you can get into the imaginary horribles about what might happen, but.
The bill does address that. A single member may only miss 2 meetings a year and participate in this way.
Well, that solves that then, thank you. So it would be one person, and that one, it could be different people, but I tend to think that the advantages outweigh the risks in this.
Well, on average, this body meets 24 times a year.
So how do you identify the person that is remote?
I guess they would have to contact the city recorder and ask for it.
I suspect that would be in the policy, that there would be some notification requirement, a deadline, or at least that's what I would ask for.
I mean, if I was away and used my cell phone, do you see me through my cell phone, or how am I known, is what I'm saying?
The bill requires that the presiding officer or the chair can visually identify the other person. We would be able to make it possible that everybody in the room would be able to see the person participating remotely.
Well, that's a disincentive. You'd be on that big screen like your big face
Yeah,
up there.
well, the reason I'm familiar with this is I used it when I was on the Board of Education. When this was available, I used it, and I was on the screen in this room from New York when we were doing school board business. And then another member used it when they were in the hospital, not for anything horribly serious, but they had their laptop on out of their hospital bed, and they voted and participated, and we saw that person in their hospital gown, so.
I would say,
So,
you
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, how does the county body or the city body determine a family or medical emergency?
That's-
How's that work?
We're going to have to decide that.
Okay, Dr. Helsley, what is that?
I think writing, that would be really difficult. It'd
Yeah,
have to be
I
ad hoc.
I think you're just going to have to use your discretion.
Right.
I mean, and if the body has to decide, then we would have to publicly vote, I guess, to decide.
One potential issue also could be, what if two people, it's only going to allow one, so if a couple people requested would be first, and we might want to specify that too. Maybe
Yes.
the first request considered, hypothetically, two people are sick, you know.
I like that adjustment. I had
Yeah.
I think this has room for manipulation, but I also think that there are countermeasures built into the overall importance of attending and being here in person and versus being absent quite a bit. And so I'm okay with this, but I do like that last comment by Dr. Lyons around specifying if there's two requests, some priority be given to the first request.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay? Does everyone understand? I believe the motion then is if I could assume,
Yeah.
Vice Mayor, that it is to approve this, adopting this policy with the caveat that the request is on a first-come, first-served
Yeah.
basis.
Mr. Johnson, do you think you can make,
Sense of that?
What I would suggest is that
We
the
adopt.
task force could request a drafting of a policy and bring it back to the next meeting.
Oh, that would be
Yeah.
actually the best way to do that.
Okay. I'm happy to do that, and then
Yes.
you could incorporate it into your recommendations for council to consider.
That sounds like an excellent plan.
Okay.
Thank you. So we decided that enough for this meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you want to start us with 8E?
Yes, so beginning again with rules that this body has considered but postponed consideration of to a later meeting. We left off with Rule 18. I don't know what the pleasure of the task force is. We do have a few formal proposals that were made as part of the agenda packet.
can we start with those?
We could
I
begin with them.
think we should start with those. Well,
On packet page 34 begins the first proposal.
so since this is my proposal, I will explain. So this was the one dealing with zoning appeals where we in effect act more as our council attorney tells us, more in a trial sort of mode, so that we can't talk to the witnesses before and we just have to listen to the arguments made. This is Lynn's opinion, but I'm offering this up for y'all for consideration, that oftentimes we have rather complex issues and people hire an attorney to represent them. And they only get 5 minutes and everybody just gets 5 minutes. So my proposal is that whoever is bringing the appeal, they can decide how they want to use their 15 minutes. They can either if they hire an attorney, the attorney could make the case for the full 15 minutes. The attorney could use 10, they could use 5, or the attorney could use whatever it took, and then you're done. My thought is that if someone is hiring an attorney to represent them in a quasi-judicial manner, that's because the owner or the person making the motion doesn't feel really qualified to explain it fully. And I think if we're sitting in judgment, they should be allowed to use their 15 minutes how they want to use them. And then That was really it.
I read the proposal and I'd like it, so I don't have any changes to make or suggestions.
Likewise.
Okay, so I believe there's a motion on the floor to accept Rule 10 as presented. And then, okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, next up, Vice Mayor Smith.
Thank you. Mine should be fairly straightforward. Rule 18 would be amended to say that any proposed ordinance or resolution properly on the city council agenda may be considered and debated by the members of council with a motion and a second on the floor regarding such proposed ordinance or resolution. And then I added another sentence on advice by Mr. Johnson. Matters originating by reason of action of the Planning Commission or land use appeals may be considered and debated by members of council with or without a motion and a second on the floor. So that would not relate to appeals, but standard zoning. So
I make a motion to accept the proposal as presented.
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Now, take us back, Mr. Johnson.
There was one final addition, excuse me.
Oh, yes.
There was a subsection 7 added in your proposal, Vice Mayor.
Right. And I approved all that.
Okay. Just want to make
The
sure
whole
we,
thing, the whole thing as presented.
actually, I think that was superfluous. Oh, no, this is separate completely. Is that right? This is about public forum.
Yes, it's a different section of Rule 18, yes.
Yes,
But it's still all Rule 18
All in Rule 18.
it is all related.
that just passed.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
The next proposal is with respect to, and we're on packet page 35, Rule 14. The task force asked me to draft some language with respect to reports of committees, and I added a sentence to subsection C. The report of the committee can contain only what has been agreed to by a majority vote at a regular or properly called meeting of which every member has been notified, where a quorum of the board or committee was present. So this makes it clear that, that you have, the committees need to vote
so like.
on
The audit
recommendations.
committee, this committee, any other kind of, a rules committee if we establish one, those kind of things, any, correct?
Correct, that if that committee is reporting out to the parent body, that is city council, it needs to vote on that report, that recommendation.
So I assume there are minutes kept in the committee meetings.
Correct.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Oh, Councilwoman Parker, sorry.
I did have a question about this language. And that conversation did help a bit because there are, I guess, multiple occasions when we might hear a report back from a committee. For instance, if a council member is representing that committee and makes that report in their council report. But with this change, one of my concerns is that we may need an update from a committee that informs us even when a committee is not able to reach a majority vote for action. So I wouldn't want to
It's almost as if we added this language, then I would want additional language that instructed committees to, you know, it's like the committee should make some sort of report, even if there are no recommendations that have reached a majority. So I don't want them to not make a report because they haven't reached a majority.
So their report would be, we talked about it and we can't decide?
Right. I don't know if anyone else is reading the language in a way that might prohibit any sort of report before a committee reaches some sort of actionable items that have been agreed upon.
Well, I think there's some merit in that because it'd bring closure to the committee process.
Right.
Otherwise, it would just be out there, and there would no report, you know. I mean, that could be a benefit, the committee's reporting that it, I don't know whether it has not reached a consensus on any findings or however that would be. And then that committee's action would have, as I said, closure to it. I think that's a possible advantage.
I'm not sure that the language precludes the possibility that a committee chair could provide an update to city council, if only to inform them there is no update. We have not yet reached a decision, but
I mean, I did that when we were talking about the housing fund. I would make reports that we were in discussion, we were moving forward, and it wasn't till a final piece of legislation came that anybody actually took action on a recommendation. So I don't know if I don't know if it goes here or if there is something, if we create a rules committee, that any committee established by this body has to at least give a quarterly report. You know.
This agenda, as well as our city council agenda, has that section at the beginning for members and
To
committee
say anything.
reports. So even if you haven't made, even if something wasn't voted upon and brought forward by the committee by formal vote, you still have that portion there as the chair, for example, to say, we met, I don't know that we need to specify anything here, or at least I don't understand the problem, maybe.
Can you put on your light? and
Seems to
mic?
be referrals. I don't think this means you can't make a committee report. This specifically talks about proposed ordinances and resolutions and referrals.
Well, I have an example in mind. We have, and it's a confusing example, but we have the Alternative Response Task Force that formed following the adoption of a resolution to address a matter that council sought a recommendation on. And I say it's a tricky one because there was some question around whether this was, a city council task force or task force formed by the mayor. That aside, I do feel like we had a resolution with request in it that was referred to that task force. We don't have a city council representative on that task force. And we don't know what the resolution of that task force is going to be yet. But I would like an update from that task force, even if there is not a agreed upon set of recommendations that comes from a majority.
Okay.
Maybe like a formal requirement to have an update as opposed to just asking someone from the committee or the mayor or whomever. You want a formal?
Yeah, I think that when there's action at council and we refer it to a committee or task force, I think the public expects an update. And so I don't want it to just get lost because there's no update to give or there's no majority that has reached a resolution. And I can't remember that resolution and whether there was a time frame set for that work. But that's another concern, like raised by Dr. Lyons. I don't know if there are any other parameters around that work, but just saying, I would like a report back in those situations, even when a majority.
Do you want to take a stab at writing something you would like to change this and bring this back at our next time? Because I don't know that we can do this on the fly in terms of, because now that you raise that, the question for me is this only a is this report required of only a committee that belongs to council? Because we're the only ones that can probably require ourselves to do a report.
Right.
So that's kind of, anybody else?
Well, I take this, the one we're on now. I mean, the way I was thinking, when you raised the question, was we wouldn't want the time to, we have a time frame to end and then there's nothing.
Right,
I mean,
right.
that, you want at least then to be a
Yes.
report that we didn't recommend any changes, weren't able to reach consensus on a change. I think there's some value in that. I don't know that would happen, but it could happen. I mean,
agree.
but that would prevent, just sort of kicking some down the road hypothetically
Forever.
by throwing it to a task force and then
Well-
it just never heard from again.
It would be like this thing that council created.
Right, this is something council created.
And I've got us on a pretty tight deadline to get something done and making reports and that kind of thing. So, but I guess unless someone has wording that they would like to present now, I'd like to move on through some other stuff and let's,
I will volunteer to try to propose a sentence that could be added to this language.
okay, and we'll
Keep
look at,
this language, but add additional language.
okay. If you'll do that, then we will look at that next time.
Okay.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, the next proposal is by Vice Mayor Smith with respect to a standing rules committee for City Council.
And I guess you all have already discussed the rule right before this one.
Yes, we
Yeah,
did,
the two
we did, we did 18 and we did the other two. Yeah, Rule 10 and Rule 18.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
okay,
I'll give an overview of this.
Yes,
So
please.
I took a look at a number of cities and counties and the rules committees that they have. I also take a look at our closest comparison, which is County Commission. And this is the structure that I would like to put forward for consideration. We can make edits now. But I'll read some of it, I guess, for maybe because some of these, there's a purpose to each of these, but obviously it will take place when and if so, we accept an ordinance accordingly. This type of committee would be a standing committee. Following other committee appointments, that's the purpose of this next section, so that it aligns with that. Recommended by Vice Mayor in January, following the regular biannual council elections. Those appointments must be approved by City Council. Membership, 5 members of council. I put a question mark on my paper that I forgot to submit. I put, or former council members, so I think this committee has benefited from having Dr. Lyons and 2 vice mayors on it, so, we can come back to that in a minute. A term, members will serve for 2 years and can be reappointed, much like the rest of the committees that we are used to. The duties would be to review the city council rules, and report all recommendations to the city council for approval, much like we're doing now. The leadership of the committee would be chair nominated by the vice mayor and approved by city council, much like the other committees that happen every 2 years. The public will be noticed in advance and will be accessible to the meetings and subject to open meeting laws. Robert's Rules of Order is our procedure. Documentation agendas published in advance, minutes taken by city recorder. All documents are archived and available to the public. The next would be the frequency, so once per quarter. And then support would be optionally include city council, legal counsel. So Mr. Frost is not here, but maybe we would need him or someone in that role. And reporting to Councilwoman Parker's general comments earlier, we shall make a report to city council at least once a year, along with any recommendations. Recommendations can be made at any time. Are there any suggested edits?
Councilwoman Parker, you have your light on. Do you have?
Well, I do think that the inclusion of legal counsel should be not optional.
Okay.
I also think that we should take more time with thinking through what the committee structure should be, since we already kind of have a temporary or a initial structure in place. Get some feedback from the community. The time that we meet is one issue for me. But if we were to include those outside of city council, the time we meet might also be an issue for others. But could you speak more to what you were saying about membership and why you were proposing only city council members?
Because, for example, I obviously had a second thought about it, but originally, the audit committee comes to mind in terms of its structure, although recently we've added non-audit committee members to it, so I added.
Non-council audit committee.
Non-council, thank you.
Qualified.
Qualified. So it was simpler, to be honest, in terms of, you could say any member of the public, you could offer that each council member gets to nominate someone. We could, as I mentioned, include.
Call myself.
Okay, one second. Let me finish my ramble here. But you could say experts in, or I actually mentioned former council members. So it's malleable, but I didn't have any other thoughts than what you just heard.
So I strongly think that these are council rules. These are the rules that we govern ourselves by. This is not how we do anything else in the city. So I think council people and perhaps former council people are the best qualified to talk about the rules that we use and how we conduct our city council business. So I do not think it is necessary to open it up to just random members of the public or other, everybody's got opinions on what we ought to do, but this is what we have to live with and what we hold ourselves accountable to. And I don't know of any other body that has standing rules for itself and how it is going to do its business that ask people not, at least in some way, tied to them to be part of those rules. So I think it should be council or former council people.
I do agree with that generally, because members of the public have access to this committee. We could change the time to make it more accessible, and members of the public will have the ability to speak to council if any changes are recommended by ordinance.
That's my opinion. Anybody have any other opinion on this?
I think it makes sense for the Rules Committee, but not necessarily the Charter Review Task Force.
Okay.
Oh,
I'll ask, yeah, this is just for the Rules Committee, so.
This is just for the
We'll
Rules
tackle the
Committee.
charter.
rules of, this is because this
Yeah.
is this is the heading for our whole agenda packet.
Correct.
This is not the rules for them. This is just city council rules.
Yeah,
So,
not the charter. That's
yeah.
right.
No, I'm saying it doesn't apply to the charter. Nothing, this says this, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. it's
Okay.
just the-
Those,
What about former council members?
well, I think you should be a current or former city council member to be appointed to this. I don't have real strong feelings one way or the other, but I liked having former council members on this because I think it has been helpful when we ask, like, why did you do it that way? Or I mean, that was my thought when we established this, but I'm not going to die on that hill. But, well, I mean, I think I think previous experience is good, but, you know. Does anybody else have an opinion? Or? All right.
But it does not preclude members of the community from making a comment.
No, we have public forum at every one of these. But I agree, you know, this is at 3:30 on a day that we have lots of meetings. But,
So I'll make a motion to approve this structure pending 3 changes. One is for membership. I think we will list 5 current or former members of Knoxville City Council. Duties, need to fix that city council rules instead of city county rules. And then support, we would remove optionally and make a formal include city council, legal counsel.
may I make a friendly
Sure.
suggestion? If we're going to say 5 members, current or former, I would say the majority should be current council members. So 3 of the 5 should be sitting council members. I mean, that's just like, we have a majority of current council members
Okay.
on this,
Majority being current.
current.
Okay.
Are you, that's a friendly amendment.
No,
Are
that's
you
a,
okay with
I
that?
accept the friendly amendment. I like the use of majority instead of calling
Yes.
out 3 and 2.
Yeah,
That's good.
majority.
Because it could be an all council,
Yes,
and that's fine. Okay, thank you. That's my motion.
okay. Is there, Ms. Helsley seconded it? Ms.
Second.
Parker?
And so is the proposal that the Rules Committee and the Charter Review Task Force are 2 separate bodies?
Yes, yes, they are.
Interesting.
The only reason we're combined right now is because this special committee will look at establishing how we do a charter review task force. We haven't even gotten that far.
It just feels a little premature then to establish this committee, future committee structure without talking about the structure of a charter review task force. But I have no strong opposition. I just
Okay,
don't understand why we're doing this at this point.
because we're trying to get all of our rules done first. And council will either pass it or not, and if they disagree, we can always come back. But I think what Councilman Smith is trying to do is, right now, our council rules don't require us to ever look at our rules. And if we create this standing committee, then we have to. Is that the intent?
Also, the charter is on a different cycle. So,
Yes.
you know, we all know you have to meet at a certain time and get it on the ballot at a certain time, and so that's its own cadence. whereas this is a quarterly, we meet every 2 weeks, we get feedback every 2 weeks on how those meetings go, so I don't want to tie one down to make progress with the other one, and I don't want to wait forever to make changes either.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay. Motion passes 5-1.
So, at this point, we can go back to Rule 18.
Yeah.
To go through, okay.
Yeah.
So, we can pick up where we left off with Rule 18, with some of the various issues that the task force considered at the last meeting. We can pick up exactly where we left off if the task force would like to. This was concerning members' debate. Rule 18 begins on page 30. That is the current language that exists in the code. The task force left off with a discussion about the number of speeches for members. Your current rule, well, your current practice is unlimited number of speeches per motion. Your written rule is 2. There were different proposals given at the last meeting. There were members who wanted to keep the unlimited. There were those who wanted to go to the written rule of 2. And I think there was also a proposal for up to 3 speeches per motion.
We did not decide this.
There was no decision made, correct?
Was there discussion about reducing the time per speech?
We've kind of divided the issue into 2 components. So the number of speeches being one issue and a separate question being the maximum time per speech. But you could take that into account, of course, as you consider how many speeches.
I mean, another part of that conversation was when the answers to our questions are taken up a lot of the time. So my preference would not be to limit the number of questions because oftentimes it's a matter of council members asking questions for additional information, not necessarily making speeches.
What section is that? I'm looking at Rule 18. If I find it here, it's on page 16 of the packet. And am I looking at the right thing?
Yes.
And
Subsection A is the section
subsection
that
A
deals
we're
with,
talking about with dealing with just council.
yes.
Okay.
If you're searching, there is no actual written rule about 2 speeches per member in these rules. It's in Robert's Rules of Order. Since this body has not adopted a rule that creates an exception to that, you default to what Roberts says, which is 2. But this body has a practice of unlimited speeches.
I'd like to propose language that we add a sentence that clarifies that the number of times council members are able to speak is not limited. But I also would like to clarify the last sentence of Section A, which gives the mayor the privilege of the floor, because I think that has caused some confusion. And as the person presiding over the meeting, it's different than Robert's rules. Do you know what I mean when I'm saying that?
Yeah, I will say it is different, but I think in some ways that's like other bodies where the chair is not the person proposing an item, which is often our agenda are things brought by the administration. And so they speak to it typically. Any thoughts on that from anybody else? I mean, so like if you look at other bodies, when I chaired another body that voted on things brought to us, I chaired it, and the person who brought the item did not chair the meeting, but they always spoke to the item that was being presented to explain it. I think that is why this is in here, but the difference in this body is that it is written that the mayor chairs our body, and I believe that is in the charter. Is it not?
That is correct.
So that is nothing that this body, that we can change. It would have to be a charter change. So I think what Councilwoman Parker is asking or suggesting or commenting on is that because it is the chair, they can speak to anything which is not normal in other bodies, because they're not usually the one presenting the item. County Commission does not, they have their agenda and they may ask the mayor questions about what the administration is bringing. So I think that's why it gets confusing for us, because it's very different from what other councils do, but that's the charter rules.
Do we need that sentence? Since by charter, the mayor chairs the meeting, do we need the last sentence in section A?
I think you would if the
Yes.
expectation is that the mayor is going to have the ability to speak freely. Without it,
Who
But
calls
that-
on them?
That is the expectation, that
But-
we change the ability of the mayor to speak freely.
But who calls on them if they are chairing the meeting? No one would be, I think
Wouldn't
that's,
they then relinquish the chair so that they can join debate?
I don't know practically how that would work.
so in Knoxville, with this city, you've essentially collapsed the role of presiding officer and the proponent of, especially resolutions. Those are being proposed by the administration more often than not. You've collapsed those roles into one role, or one person rather. They serve as presiding officer, and they're also serving as the chief executive proposing all of these items. So we have, through the charter, have imposed that responsibility on her to do both roles. If we were only following Robert's rules, yes, the expectation is that the presiding officer would be a neutral party or would maintain a sense of neutrality about the proposals before. That's not realistic when it's her administration that's proposing the items, at least in my opinion. So the question is this sentence necessary? I think it is necessary if this body wants the mayor to participate in the debate.
Without being called on.
Because who would call on them other than the presiding officer, which by the charter is the mayor? I mean, I understand your frustration and I hear it. I'm just telling you, I don't know that there's anything that we can do about that.
Well, that's the discussion, is trying to figure out if there is anything that we can do to change the culture of our meetings, where they run a little bit more like the public expects a meeting to run because of what they've seen in other spaces. Even just putting a time limit on it would be, would present a bit of fairness, that if we all are expected to introduce within 8 minutes, then the mayor should be, something like that.
I can see that if you're talking about if someone, is presenting, like when you brought resolutions and you present them, you have more time to discuss it. Well, in that way, you would be giving them 8 minutes for everything on the agenda.
Max, though.
I don't think it can be max because they have the right to rebut and answer questions.
I mean, just to the degree it's a max for us. You know what I mean? Just saying, I think just having Will put the timer up when the mayor speaks would change the culture of our meetings.
But, Will, can you answer, if I propose something and I have 8 minutes to make my proposal, I am allowed to enter debate again.
Absolutely.
So I don't think you would limit the mayor's ability to re-enter the debate.
No, not more than we are. No. They would be limited in the same degree that we are to debate. Right now, there's no limitation.
If the task force wants to consider that, I would ask that it consider, there would need to be some expectation that the mayor would let me, as the timekeeper, know that they were entering debate. Otherwise, I wouldn't know when to time her because she's constantly
Or
speaking.
the mayor, whoever
Right.
the
Yeah,
mayor may
whoever
be.
the mayor is, I would need to know when to turn the clock on because she's.
Yeah, it would, I mean, generally, it's a request that the vice mayor chair temporarily while the chair enters debate.
That has happened before.
Can you explain?
Most recent example I can recall, when Mayor O'Hara was mayor, City Council was considering an increase to the mayor's salary. It would not actually have affected Mayor O'Hara's salary, but she relinquished the chair to the vice mayor. I think it might have been Vice Mayor Saunders, actually, who took the chair and presided over that portion of the meeting. And then she took the chair back at the conclusion of that.
Would most circumstances fall into the scenario where a mayor may make an introductory remark, but as discussion begins, formal discussion begins, if he or she wanted to then speak after the discussion begins, he or she would be recognized at that point and timed? Meaning, there's some introductory remark parts, but once the discussion counts initiated by a council member, or maybe even a motion, there's a way to designate something on the front end so that when debate begins,
Is after it's presented.
he or she, mayor, has to be recognized and timed accordingly to participate in the discussion from there.
I do think it gets confusing sometimes when a council member may ask a question and we're not sure who's going to answer it. Is it is it Mr. Brace? Is it whatever? And oftentimes a mayor, some mayors more than others, will choose to answer the question. And is that then considered, for your purposes of discussion, Ms. Parker, is that entering in debate if they're answering questions? Like if we ask the head of engineering to answer questions or the head of any other department to ask a question, if the mayor chooses to answer that question, to me, that's not really entering debate. So again, I think Mr. Johnson is saying, how does one then know?
But yeah, there are times when we ask questions, we want clarification on something, and then there are times when the mayor says, let me tell you all this. This is why I'm bringing this forward. This is why I support this.
And that's debate.
And she begins to make her case. And that's, to me, entering debate. That is not, and
It's
of
true.
course, I want that chair to be that more neutral party that I think it makes meetings run better.
That we're all used to.
Yeah. And I realize, with the charter requiring her to preside over meetings, with her staff presenting a lot of the issues that we're voting on. I agree with Mr. Johnson that it's not reasonable to expect her to fill that neutral role, but I do think that there are, and perhaps what I could do is bring a proposal.
I think that would be helpful. I think that would be helpful. I mean, it worked for Councilman Smith and me to bring a proposal and let people think about it, so let's try that.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so once again, we didn't solve that one. Move on.
No, okay. So we kind of move around. We've been spending a lot of time on members' debate, so we could go to public comments if that's where the task force would like to go. A question that, and this would be more, I guess, a request for me. The instructions for sign up, those are not codified. Those are on our website. They are in writing, but it may be advisable or prudent to put those in writing in our rules about how people sign up to speak for public forum.
I think that would be wise, but
How is this system working out for you?
when people call.
The recent rules? I think it's working out quite well, by and large. The public may not always, especially because members of the public may only come to a meeting every once in a while, so they're not all knowledgeable about the rules change, the deadline to sign up. But, we inform them of that rule if they try to sign up right before the meeting begins, for example, and they can sign up for the next meeting. That's often relevant with public forum, especially since it's not to an agenda item. But it is providing us flexibility. It was especially useful in the context of this group being formed because it would have been very challenging for me to do this meeting and then turn around and have to worry about beer board and the list of speakers and city, in terms of all that timing.
Now, if we had a policy where we put out a sheet of paper at the end of the dais and said folks could sign up, they had to sign up either before 4 p.m. or they could sign up the day of the meeting, up until public forum. And then we went and got that list when the meeting concluded to see who was on it. Would that create any hardship?
I think it would not be necessarily a hardship for that, but I think we would definitely have to stick to the time limit of the meeting. I think if we want to allow more access to public forum, I think we should change the speaking time to 3 minutes and still keep it 30, and that would give us the opportunity to hear from 10 members of the public about non-agenda related items at the end of the meeting. So I think it was more along the lines, for those of you that have served longer, to just make sure that there was some idea of how many people were going to be speaking before the meeting. Vice Mayor Saunders, you're nodding your head.
No, I agree. It's nice to hear from people, whoever they may be, about whatever items are on their mind. But if you give them 3 minutes, I think they can probably compress their remarks. If you give them 5 minutes, some will expand their remarks to make sure they take all the 5 minutes, which sometimes is not very helpful in my opinion.
Anything from this side of the room?
Yeah,
Dr. Lyons?
I think I would concur with the 3 minutes and having more people able to speak. I think I was watching the last meeting when there a number of people wanted, and there was a motion, well, can we let more people speak, but they could speak for 3? And that, and also from the report that we had from other councils and commissions and so forth, and just my own observation over hundreds of council meetings, I tend to think as Councilman, Vice Mayor, ex-Vice Mayor, whatever, Saunders said, there's a tendency to expand to the time available that I don't think is, I would rather hear more people for 3 minutes than fewer for 5, put it that way.
I would agree with that sentiment.
I think most people can complete their comments in 3 minutes as well. What I'm wanting to shift us towards is a culture closer to what they have at County Commission. And I don't know if y'all were able to watch any of the meetings this week. But they just, I don't know if they tend to bend the rules a lot or whatnot, but now it seems every time I watch a county commission meeting these days, someone stands up in the audience and wants to speak, and they have to explain, this isn't your time to speak, and then the person in the audience keeps talking, and then eventually county commission's like, well, come on up, and we'll hear you for a second. You know, and they just seem to be a little bit more flexible. And it seems to create less drama. Like, just go ahead and let them speak, and then 3 minutes later, it's over, and there's not a big protest coming the next week to teach y'all a lesson, and then there's not a big commotion, you know? And I just wish we could get a little bit looser to allow for that type of atmosphere.
Councilman Smith, Vice Mayor Smith, please.
I'm going to be a hard opposition to that, only because I got there's a 24-hour public forum that people have access to with me, and maybe I'm speaking from my own, but the whole purpose of this is predictable rules that people can plan for. And the thing that I'm always refreshed by is, or just reminded is, for everybody that wants a spontaneous input of some sort or some flexibility, you're taking away time from somebody who has planned to be there and scheduled and signed up and done the things. So it's actually not intruding on us. We're going to be here whether it's 2 hours or 6. But you're intruding on the people who have a land use item that, or whatever item, that they have planned for. And so I don't want, maybe I need to watch more county commission meetings because I watch 0, but that's not something I would be supportive of.
So I have made a motion on the floor, if I may, as chair, or to switch to 3 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes for public forum at the end of our meetings, as they currently are, with, for anybody who wants to speak to items not on the agenda.
I'll second that motion.
Second, yeah.
You got a lot of seconds.
One correct, I mean, the items could be on the agenda, right? It was just also.
Oh, yes, but public
Not
forum
limited.
is where you can speak to, yeah,
To speak to
yeah,
any item.
any
I would
item.
second that.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ms. Parker?
I'm not opposed, but I would prefer it to be a longer public forum than 30 minutes.
Do you want to propose and that, I mean, I have five yeses for 30 minutes.
Right. Yeah,
So,
that's
so
nice.
you're opposed to that?
I don't.
Because we have a motion on the floor we have to act on.
Can I make a suggestion that we proceed with that? Because in a quarter or some change, we can,
Yes.
whoever's on the committee can revisit all of these things.
So all in favor? Aye. I heard 5 ayes. All opposed? Ms.
I'll
Parker?
abstain.
Okay. Motion carries. It's 4:30. Do we want to adjourn?
I have a few priority
Okay.
things I would hope to
Okay,
address.
all right.
I'll try it quickly.
Okay.
In Rule 18, this is just some housekeeping, in my opinion. Subsection B, sub 2, it speaks to each person shall be permitted to speak for 5 minutes and shall not have more than one time to speak, except that the chair may allow 2 minutes to the proponent for rebuttal. This is in the context of public comments, just by and large. Current practice is that the mayor affords a rebuttal period for appeals only, but this rule just leaves it wide open that somehow that a rebuttal could be offered on any item on the agenda, basically. So my request would be, if it's amenable to the task force, to rewrite this to make it clear that, well, actually, just to strike it out altogether, because this task force adopted a recommendation to incorporate the chair's proposal for appeals, and that incorporates a rebuttal period. So unless we think a rebuttal is needed somewhere else, just take this out. That would be my recommendation.
Well, that's part of the reason I abstained on the last vote was because I thought we were replacing the whole section B with what we were voting on. And then we were just going with a simple public forum of 30 minutes, 10 people speak, none of this rebuttal mess, none of this, nothing else.
So you're saying you're fine with taking out B?
I'm fine with taking out B.
Okay, let's take out B.
But
That's what you
I
said.
do think we need to be clear on what we're recommending
I'm confused now.
to council.
Okay,
All of subsection B?
I'm sorry, 2.
Sub 2.
What you said about the rebuttal.
Yeah, I just want to take out everything after the word to speak, from the comma on, strike all of that.
That's what everybody understood, so
Okay.
that's what they agreed.
Thank you.
I just said the wrong thing.
Okay.
It's late.
Now, wait a second. So, and the previous motion would amend the first part of that section, B2,
Actually,
to 3 minutes, or?
strictly speaking, the proposal about public forum really would go back to rule number 3, I think. Rule number 2, the order of business, it currently defines the period for public forum.
I'm sorry, I got on that because you were talking about how to sign up for public
Right.
forum, so that's what brought that to mind.
Yes. But I believe we have struck those instructions from rule number 2 about public forum, and we could insert the rules on public forum into Rule 18 if that's where the task force wishes to go.
Well, we have to have rules somewhere about
Yes.
public forum.
I think the earlier discussion was that it was an awkward place to put rules about public speaking into
So it should
the
be
order of
in
debate.
in our meetings, okay.
Yes.
So,
I'd be happy to incorporate, well, we just will. We'll incorporate that motion that was adopted earlier into Rule 18.
into Rule 18,
Yes.
okay. And we are taking out,
We're taking out the rebuttal option that seems to be a blanket for anything that might be on the agenda.
okay.
That might be the extent. I've got lots of other issues that I can talk about, but it's up to you all.
Are they,
How substantive are they?
Well,
We'll go to a quarter till.
okay. Also in Rule 18, this is, this is subsection 3. So when a number of persons desire to speak to an issue, each side shall be limited to 3 speakers and a maximum speaking time of 15 minutes. So this is the sides. So there are
Right.
3 people in favor, 3 people opposed. Sometimes that has posed issues when people try to sign up to speak. They're not clear about their position. Some people would like to sign up and be in a neutral position. The Planning Commission allows people to sign up in a neutral position. I'm raising it because people have requested it. I'm not necessarily an advocate for it, but they have asked.
I don't, again, I think that the votes taken earlier also addressed this issue, and it would no longer be 3 people on each side. It would be, speakers have 3 minutes for 30 minutes.
No, because this is the rebuttal in the meeting. Mine was for public forum, 3 minutes per person at the end of the meeting so that we could hear from 10 people instead of 5 minutes and hear from 6 people, which would allow us to hear from more people at the public, and we may not be asked to suspend our rules all the time at the end of a meeting, was my thought
I don't think
process.
there's a distinction between the governance of the hearing from the public within the meeting or at the end of the meeting.
This is debate, this is
This is
not,
debate, this is not.
this is not public forum.
This is not public forum, so
Well,
we,
if I could, and maybe Will was speaking to this, I think one thing that's very difficult, and we're showing here is, I think we'd have a separate section, public forum and end of meeting, and then the limits,
Yes.
and then otherwise speaking to items during,
yes,
you know,
yes.
that, those should
I
be
think that should
separated,
be a
because this is all
separate-
convoluted right
Yes.
now, which is showing in this discussion.
Indeed.
public forum, a whole nother section, at the end of order of debate.
I'm happy to draft that.
Thank you. So
Okay.
now, about this. This is where I think we're talking about. Do we want to add a neutral position for items on the agenda that we will be voting on? See, I think this applies to things that we are voting on.
You mean
Right, but
somebody,
I don't feel that unless we're sitting in that quasi judicial role, I've never felt that it was fair to force the public into a position when they come to speak to us.
Well, that's,
So I don't feel like we need number 3.
okay, do y'all understand that? So she's saying unless we're in a judicial point of view, I think what I'm hearing Ms. Parker and Vice Mayor Smith say is fine with neutral. I hear Ms. Parker saying she doesn't really care whether they sign up for, against, or neutral.
6 speakers, no matter what, right?
6 speakers. But quite frankly, I do think you need the opportunity for, if a developer wants to do something and a neighborhood doesn't like it, you need to be able to have a for and an against, so it is fair for council to hear both sides of an issue. That's why it's called an order of debate. I do think people can sign up as neutral, but without having some indication, you could, in theory, stack the deck, and people who feel differently are never heard about an issue that we're voting on. I don't know. I don't know. A planning commission allows it. Planning commission allows it, is what Will is saying. And
Well, I've
people,
seen
and people
some-
ask us
Right.
for that ability.
And sometimes people are concerned about certain elements of and that's why you get that sometimes. You know, they're overall okay, however, this one element troubles them. But I agree, if you don't have the positive and negative, and somebody, you just, like you say, a developer could say, all right, sign up early, we're gonna, take the slots.
Or
And you
neighbor-
have only ones, or the opposite.
Or a neighborhood
Or
could,
neighborhood,
and
same
the
thing, yeah.
person trying to do the project can
Right.
never tell why they
Right.
think.
But I think it puts a little bit of the burden responsibility on the person conducting the meeting, because I've witnessed recently, I think y'all have, some people said they're for, but they got up and they were opposed. I don't know what you do, but that happens.
I mean, that's what people are going to do to be able to speak, to,
Well, I think you should then say you can be for, against, or neutral.
But the issue, what I see as the issue, in addition to forcing people to one side or the other, is that you can stack the deck, as you all have said, but the other side of it is, if something has overwhelming support or overwhelming opposition, but they have to have an even number of speakers. It can make it seem like they have an equal level of support.
Well, that's why I've also seen sometimes groups before or against something who sit in the audience and the speaker speaks and says, anyone here who's for this, please stand. Anybody who, so I
Which is
have,
technically against our rules for them to do, to address the audience rather than us.
not, the speaker speaking for people can't say.
Address the audience. That's at least what our presiding officer has said.
That has been said before. Yes.
Yeah, I think if you, okay, we can beat this, but I have also seen people say, if you're for this new school, everybody dress in the school colors, and you can then see that everybody's in the school colors. I mean, there are ways to let it be known, and they also email, but I think the point of debate in a meeting by Robert's rules is so that the pros and the cons are heard, so.
But I think also the reason why some legislative bodies don't limit debate is because there are going to be a diverse array of reasons and perspectives that come from our community, and it's hard to limit that just to 3 voices. It's better to just hear from everyone, in my opinion. That's why it's difficult for me to limit debate. If someone takes the time to come here for our meeting, it's hard for me to say that we should not make time to hear from them, even if we allow it for a minute,
Do you have a proposal about how long you want debate to go on? I mean, it's.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying earlier with that first motion of just having that set time period rather than any other limitations on who can speak during that time period.
But it was 15 minutes per side in the quasi judicial thing.
No, I mean, your proposal was for 30
Right,
minutes. So
right.
I thought that was going to be anytime we have public forum, not just the public forum at the end of the meeting.
I don't consider this public forum, I consider this debate.
But each agenda item can have 6 people sign up for it, and that means a 30-minute public forum
So are you,
is possible for each agenda item.
so are
So
you-
that's why I interpreted it that way. And I'm saying, each agenda item can have up to 30 minutes of public forum.
Are you making that in the form of a motion?
It's just hard to know. I mean, I can make it in form of a motion. I don't know if I'm saying it will replace B3
Okay.
or how it would combine with the motion you made earlier.
Well, in the interest of the fact that it's 4:48, why don't you have some time to think about that? And if you want to bring a proposal back next time so that,
I'll talk to Will also, since Will's going to write that section on public forum, to see if that might be where we can capture some language. I don't know.
okay, in the interest of trying to move this along now that we're at the end to the really hard stuff, I would like to ask the city recorder to poll the members of this to see if we could meet again in a couple of weeks to try to move this along to get this done. Maybe we can't, but how many more things do you think we have to cover, Mr. Johnson?
I don't know, really. You've decided on lots of issues today. There may be not a lot of interest in addressing some of these others, but
Can I make a suggestion? I'm happy to meet in 2 weeks. I would like, if it's possible, for Mr. Johnson or anybody else to send over by email remaining topics of discussion and proposed language.
Yes.
We can all do homework in between and come prepared to discuss them. and be efficient with our time as opposed to starting from scratch.
Absolutely,
With the
and-
remaining items.
I agree, and if anyone, if you look at those and you have strong opinions on what you want us to do, then write a proposal and it can go out in the packet so that it can be reacted to the next time we meet.
Can we remind me of the timeline for our work on this committee? Are we hoping to wrap up by the end of the year?
I'm hoping that we wrap up with the rules in the next couple of meetings so that it can go before this body, before city council to adopt any changes that we've made. And then we begin talking about the charter review. I'm trying to, and all that's got to be done. I think our ordinance or the resolution was that we had to be completed by November or something like that.
By October.
By October,
In October,
in October.
With
So-
both?
yes.
With both, which is why I'm trying to finish this,
I think we should attempt to make the next meeting our last.
yeah, and then move to
Charter.
charter that gives us the end of July, October.
Well, I'm not
September and
able to
October.
meet in 2 weeks.
Okay, well then,
Whenever our next meeting is,
Whenever our
I
next
suggest we
meeting
make
is.
it our last one focused on the rules. And assuming we create a standing committee, they can tackle what's remaining.
what's left?
The next regular meeting for this body would be July 22nd.
All right. And that should be on everyone's calendar. So we will stand adjourned till then. Does everybody understand the assignments?
July 22nd.
July 22nd. If you've got anything you feel strongly about, send it in a written proposal to be considered, because we're going to get through what we can get through and then be done. And whatever's left goes to the standing committee we just created. All right. Without objection, we're adjourned.